Hi there, and welcome to awomanofvirtue.com. I just wanted to give a brief introduction and say hello and kind of introduce myself here. So my name is Danielle, and I've been married for 10 years. 6 years of my marriage has been me being on the fighting wife journey. And when I say the fighting wife journey, I mean learning how to end the fighting in my marriage. Early on in my marriage, there was so much fighting, and there was kind of a climax around year 4 where I cried out to God and just was begging Him to end the fighting in my marriage. And the very first thing He said to me was Proverbs 21:9, there's a way that appears to be right, but in the end it leads to death. And I just broke down because I felt like the only one in the world who knew exactly how I felt seemed to be against me too. I mean, God, don't you understand that I just want him to be a good leader, and I just want him to spend more time with us, and you know the list. There's lots of reasons why we fight with our husband. Maybe sometimes they're not right? But there's lots of reasons why we can fight with them. But the very next thing I felt the Lord say to me was Proverbs 14:12. There's a way that appears to be right, but in the end it leads to death. And so I took that as such, it really encouraged me, because I was like, well, that means that if my way's wrong, then that means you have a way, God, and your way is perfect. And I felt like He said, yes, yes, you're exactly right. And so that kind of started my journey. That was 6 years ago now. And I had 3 kids at that time. Now we have 5. And, I started writing my book, The Quarreling Wife, which is available on Amazon by Danielle M. Miller. And then, then the blog came. And then after that, my podcast came, called the Fighting Wife Podcast, which I've put more of my efforts into. I've kind of neglected this blog for the last couple years. And honestly, I was really considering changing the title, because I wasn't really seeing the connection between a woman of virtue and the fighting wife. But my husband, he said, no, I really think you should keep a woman of virtue. Well, I see him as, he's the leader of my home. And so, when we really understand this, we understand that God wants to lead us through the government that He's established and all of that. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to keep it then. So I was really racking my brain for the last couple years. I'd say the last year, quite a bit. And just, where's the connection? Well, in the very beginning of Proverbs 31, before anything, she did, because there's a lot of things we say. Oh, well, I stay home and I cook and I clean, and oh, she bought a field, and, so she's a businesswoman and she did all this, and we can say that we're the woman of virtue, right? I did it for years, and I don't cheat on my husband, and I'm a Christian, so I'm definitely a woman of virtue. But in the beginning it says, she will do him well all the days of her life. She will not bring him harm. He has trust in her. He will lack nothing of value. That's first. That comes first before anything else she did. If anything doesn't come underneath the jurisdiction of doing good for her husband, did she do it? I don't think she did. And I don't think that God would glorify, or not glorify, but like emphasize a woman who was not after His own heart. We're not going to be perfect. This woman of virtue, she wasn't perfect, okay? Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. This is not a perfection thing, but, she's in the Bible for a reason, and yes, we can do all those things, but we need to be bringing it under the government of our husband, which, if you get into my podcast, The Fighting Wife, if you read my book, if you follow me on Instagram, you will see that, ending the fighting in our marriage is simply a byproduct of doing things God's way. And actually, this is the big secret, but it's not a secret at all, and I want to let you in on it right here in the beginning, is that it's really not about ending the fighting. It's about God's leadership, but the fighting is such a big deal that God has to back it up, and He has to deal with the fighting first before He can lead. Now, how is that related to trust? Well, a woman of virtue, in the very first part, it says, the heart of her husband trusts in her. She will do him good and not harm all the days of her life. Well, at the very base of, You know, I think a lot of the reason we do fight with our husbands is because we want him to listen to us. We want him to take our counsel. Well, guess what? If he doesn't trust you, he's not going to take your counsel. If you're fighting with him, you know, he's not going to trust you. If we're doing him harm by fighting, he's not going to trust us. You know, one thing that I find really interesting is that in Genesis 2:18, way in the beginning, it says, God says, it is not good that man should be alone. I will make a helper who is suitable for him. That is the woman, that is you and I. But then in Proverbs 21:9, it says, better for a man to live alone than to live with a quarrelsome wife. So him being alone is a better alternative than being with us when we're fighting with him. And I think it's because, you know, that can do so much damage. And so hopefully you can see the connection between trust and a woman of virtue and the fighting wife. I mean, there's so much here, and hopefully you just dive into this. But a big way that we can earn our husband's trust is by stopping the fighting. Okay, there's one tab in this website labeled broken trust, and the fighting wife is in that one, and it's going to be ways that we break the trust. And then there's going to be another tab, how we mend that trust. You know, a big way that we mend the trust is we have to stop the fighting. So go to Stop the Fighting Wife, the podcast. There's a lot there. Immerse yourself in everything. You know, buy my book maybe if you want. And by the way, it's not a money issue. I have it as cheap as I can. To be honest, Amazon takes such a big cut. And then there's obviously it costs money to print it. And then anything I would make, which is literally just pennies, but when it becomes a substantial amount, we donate it to missions. But initially I was going to make it all a PDF file, but not everybody has a printer. So I just figured a book would be more convenient. But in the foundational work, I do want to say hello. Hi. You know, this video is I do want to say hello, and I'm so glad that you're here, and wherever you jump to in, you know, this blog, the podcast, whatever, I don't know where you're going to go. But there is some foundational work, and you know, the foundational work is deception, fear, and desperation. And there's going to be an article for each of those, and there's going to be a video just like this one in each of those blog categories. So, and I hope to do lots of videos throughout all of this to kind of keep things moving along. I don't know for sure yet if I'm going to start a YouTube channel for the fighting wife. I might, I'm not sure. But if you need anything, please reach out to me at Stop the Fighting Wife on Instagram. That's stop, period, the, period, fighting, period, wife. I've come alongside so many women, and I'd love to come alongside you if you're struggling with something, you know, free of charge, definitely free of charge. I'm your sister in this, and we're all in different parts of our journey, right? And we're all different parts of the body too. So, you know, we're supposed to be coming alongside of each other. Reach out to me if you need, and yeah, I just wanted to say hello. I'll see you in the next video, the deception video. Okay, bye.